Today on the Tom Kelly Show podcast, we are going to talk about the cutest couple in Massapequa, Long Island that may be destroying our property values. Actually, I'm not that passionate about it, but you know what? Just that's the tease. Why am I telling you now? Let's start the show.
The Tom Kelly Show. Everybody, I want you to go to the Tom Kelly Show. I want you all to know about the Tom Kelly Show.
Content warning, spoiler alert. What the hell does that lawn sign really mean? You are experiencing a content-filled, wacky, let's just do the damn show edition of the Tom Kelly Show. Quick shout out to Mark Epstein, with whom I did the podcast last week. He said sometimes his favorite episodes of the show are just where I effing do it. So let's effing do it. I have a whole list of topics I want to talk about, and the list just keeps growing, but my the balls, the chutzpah, the whatever you want to say, the amount of I got to do this has not outweighed the just effing do it until right now. We are recording Tuesday, November 14th at 1 p.m. My name is Tom Kelly. I'm a stand-up comedian from Long Island who lives in New York City. My career fell apart during the pandemic. I now work in television and radio, warming up audiences and creating content, and things just haven't been the same. And this is the podcast where one man owns his midlife crisis. I hate that expression, but it's really just me laughing about the world around me. There you go. If you're a new listener, now you're on board. And this is the top of the Tom Kelly inverted content pyramid. I am on YouTube as Tom Kelly Show. Hit subscribe there. I am on TikTok and Instagram as Tom Kelly Show. Hit subscribe there. And of course, your favorite podcast app, Tom Kelly Show. There's so much to share. By the way, this is my favorite sweatshirt. I bought it from Saltwater. I have gone viral in this shirt twice. My niece Olivia used to work at Saltwater, Long Island. She convinced me to buy a lot of Saltwater sweatshirts for Christmas last year. It was actually a very special few hours of me shopping at their store in Walt Whitman Mall. And hey, I have got 10 million views of your sweatshirt on TikTok. Can I get some free stuff? Thank you, Saltwater. Send it over now. Yeah, that's the demand free stuff. That's how you get things. Lots to talk about. I have a list. I'm just going to pound through it. I'm going to do the Magic Mirror, which is the little moment where I kind of do a shout out to an old show, Romper Room, where you say where you shout out the listeners. I'm going to do the Magic Mirror at the beginning. Magic Mirror time. Shouting out a couple of our listeners here. I see Kathleen and her husband, Joe. Kathleen is writing a movie about facial blindness. Nobody cares who's going to star in it because all the people who would go to a movie about facial blindness won't recognize who's in it. Just say it was Tom Cruise. They won't know. Also, Magic Mirror to Kathy and Peter Walther, Steve Berger, Joe Berger, and Lex Berger. They all came to my show at Governor's Comedy Club last month, and it was a great time. And it was just a great time. I get such anxiety producing shows, but it was a great mix of people who knew me, people who were fans of my content from Long Island, and a couple of new people who just wandered into a comedy show, and of course, old friends. Thank you to the old friends who came to the show. Special shout out to Joe Berger. You guys, if you're a longtime friend of the Tom Kelly Show, and a longtime friend of mine, you know that I was born in Brooklyn on a block called East 28th Street. And then my family moved down to Massapequa, Long Island. So I have known Steve Berger, who has been a guest on the podcast on more than one occasion. I worked with Steve at a media production company out on Long Island back in the 1990s. And we're friends. He's the one guy I stayed friends with from that company. And, we talk quite a bit. And Steve would always say, his wife grew up in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. And I'm talking to his wife, Jo, who I've only met, I think a handful of times, 5 times tops. And Joe was saying, I grew up in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. And there's always this moment of where you do the association game. I always say, hey, I grew up in Brooklyn. I lived next to the owner of a restaurant, Brennan and Carr. And then, people will say where in Brooklyn they live, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, speed through the story. I grew up on East 28th Street between T and U. This woman, Jo Berger, my friend's wife, says, oh, I grew up in Sheepshead Bay. And then she says, I lived on East 28th Street. I'm like, that's not Sheepshead Bay. That's Marine Park. And then I asked her address. And long story short, Jo is substantially older than me. Substantially. Probably 10 to 12 years older than I am. I'm just being a douche, by the way. But yeah, anyway, speed through the story. I grew up at 2029 East 28th Street, and she grew up at 2052 East 28th Street. We lived 100 yards away from each other. Had no idea who each other was, because that's just New York City living, that you can live 100 yards away from somebody and not know who they are. Hell, I always talk about living in this apartment. I do not know who's the woman underneath me. I know she's blonde, and she had a boyfriend, and I met her the day she moved in, and I'll probably see her again the day she moves out. Anyway, that's New York, man. That's New York. But anyway, it was a nice little moment. Actually, since I am talking about the Sullivan family. Again, it's a funny story about me growing up. I lived at 2029 East 28th Street. Then at 2031 East 28th Street was the Sullivan family. They're Brooklyn royalty, 7 boys. Their dad owned a restaurant, Brennan and Carr. And the family still owns it. Best roast beef sandwich. It's on one of those best food lists in New York City. You have to go. It's a real Brooklyn experience. But on the other side, in 2027 East 28th Street, was their great aunt, who I thought was my real aunt at different points in time, on and off, Mrs. Dalton, Aunt Marge, and Grandma Alice, Mrs. Sullivan, their grandma. Anyway, speed through the story. I substituted for the best warm-up comedian in the world, Joey Cola, at the Drew Barrymore show. And I knew that now remember, it's Ursula and Russ Sullivan, 7 boys, and I knew that one of the grandkids was working as a stagehand at Drew Barrymore. And I was talking to Junior, the stagehand, and I said, hey, anybody with the last name Sullivan work here? And he goes, yeah, there's a kid on the dock. And I go out and I meet Austin Sullivan, who is this nice guy, Michael Sullivan's son. And Michael Sullivan used to pick me up by the neck as a kid. I just remember he was just like he was the fun neighbor, just a good guy. He was just a hilarious guy. He was a football player. He was just, and still is, just such a warm soul. He actually worked as Paulie Walnuts' body man and driver at one point from The Sopranos. Michael Sullivan knows everybody on earth. And it's funny, that was the compliment one of the other stagehands gave about his son. Yeah, that kid knows everybody. He's connected to everybody, which is easy when you have, 7 uncles on your dad's side. I don't even know what's going on the mom's side, and his mom is Donna, is a beautiful, great woman too. But anyway, there's nothing like that moment where you feel like an old man and you look a kid in the eye and you say, your great aunt used to babysit me. Again, I am off the rails. Again, as Mark Epstein says, he loves it when I do the last minute shows and I have a list of things to do and I do something completely different. I have a pretty Massapequa-ish topic, but it's one that can relate to everybody. Going through the Massapequa Dads Facebook group, somebody posted a sign of a house where the sign said, finally divorced. And now it's on Facebook. Everybody is posting their opinion about, that crazy lady. What kind of a-hole would do that in a divorce? Someone else writes, the poor children. All these little remarks are being posted. And I decide, since I have had the most, if you generate success as that which gets people to know your name and that which puts asses in chairs at comedy shows and that which gives you money, the best independent success I have had as a comedian has been doing sort of Massapequa-oriented content as a comedian. So I went out with the selfie stick to go do a comedy piece. And this is what happened. I'm giving you guys, if you saw it already on Instagram, before you fast forward, this is the longer version than what I plan to put on Instagram. There's a lawn sign in Massapequa for a couple that's finally divorced. Or are they? Okay, seriously, Alec Baldwin has shot someone and Massapequa has an accused serial killer. Hasn't Massapequa gone through enough to depreciate our property values? My dream is that the Google Street View truck drives down this block, and that way this is archived forever. Whoever this person is, I've actually been sitting outside her house on my Tinder, swiping right, hoping we'd match. We've heard of red flags. This is a red lawn sign. All right, so get next to me, get next to me, get next to me. This is our shot. All right, so here's the best part of my day. I'm now outside in front of their house making a comedy video talking about how they're ruining my goddamn property values. And then it turns out they're not actually getting divorced. Tell them what happened. It's their 30th anniversary. Why did you do this?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We figured after 30 we'd do something different. So my neighbors thought it would be funny to put the divorce sign on the lawn.
We've been saying for months that when we turn 30, we want a new contract. It's over. We're not renewing the contract, not renewing the lease, anything. It's done.
Okay.
So we're going to rewrite it. So we always say, everybody, with Monday, somebody's moving out, somebody has to leave. So they took it one step and said, we'll have a good time. Happy divorce.
Okay, so you had the divorce sign, you have the sign on the lawn, but
Yes.
good news is you're renewing for another 30?
No, not yet.
Just
Monday,
10,
just
just
tomorrow. Maybe 10. We'll do 5 or 10.
Okay,
We have no
this
longer
couple
30.
is so wonderfully annoying. They're going to be married for 105 years. I love you. Okay. And the best part is they just told me that Tyson is cancer-free is the sign across the street. Tyson's a dog.
But it's a dog who went through chemo and radiation.
I know, I
He's
cried.
wonderful, And he's the sweetest dog, and he's a rescue. They've rescued him. He's the sweetest dog in the entire world, and they saved his little life.
And you're right. I'm still sad it's a dog, but I cried a little less. Is that fair? I just cried a little less. It's only a matter of time till somebody shoots me for standing on their lawn. All right. Thank you, guys. This was. So there you go. I think that's Pat and Steve. They blatantly asked me not to say their last name, which is kind of funny because I can barely remember their first names now. But great couple, very affable when you consider that I was standing on their lawn taking pictures of their lawn sign. But then again, when you put up a sign that says finally divorced, you kind of... You're expecting to attract a little bit of attention. By the way, I'd rather my neighbors put up a finally divorced sign on their lawn than put Christmas lights up before Thanksgiving. Boom. Take that, America. So yeah, that's the story there. And then you just sort of get into, I had a whole list of, like, you talk about how my comedy gets derailed. I have all these jokes, about ways, like I had this impression that it was an angry woman who got the house from a husband who tried to squeeze her out of it. Or maybe the other way around, but I had this vibe that it was a woman getting divorced. And it's just funny. You see something and then it's exactly not what you think. I had this whole thought of running up to the house at night and rearranging the letters into different words, drivenly focal, cavern foil. I had craved fondly, landlady vice. That's all words you can make out of the phrase. That's all. Yeah, I'm saying that right. That's all words you can make out of with the letters in the phrase finally divorced. And then I was thinking, geez, what would my relationship lawn sign be? Lost my virginity at 26. Got to second date. She was looking for a sugar daddy simp and I drew boundaries and now she is gone. That would be a really long and really expensive lawn sign, especially when you consider those lawn sign companies charge by the letter and I don't have a lawn. But, and then and again, when I thought it was a real, I wrote pages of content. I wrote a whole podcast script about this and it didn't, and there you go. It was, when I thought it was one side who got the house from the other, I had a whole big thing. My thought was if you really got divorced, because there are people who do this. Like I've seen finally divorced signs on cars. I have seen finally divorced. I actually have gone to divorce parties. One of my favorite nights of going out ever was going out with my friend Jack Squicciarini on what was supposed to be his wedding day when the wedding didn't happen. And we had we had made T-shirts. When I say we made T-shirts, I made T-shirts because Jack was he was engaged to somebody that I don't even remember the person, except that I just remember it not being the right person. And anyway, there's something to be said about take your energy and do something positive. And what's funny about this couple is they actually are married, and they have jokes that I make in relationships, or not even relationships. At this point, I just want a girlfriend for a weekend. I kind of, sort of aspirationally aimed for that. Without getting too into it, I had a friend come into town, may or may not have bought the plane ticket. And literally after I bought the plane ticket, the friend said, "You don't have any expectations, do you?" And the truth is, man, I'm not a sexual being. I would love, my expectation was flirtiness. My expectation was a couple of nice dinners. And my expectation was maybe the thought that it could become something. And long story short, nothing better than when the person comes into town, lands at the airport, and then blatantly starts talking about whatever guy just recently broke her heart and won't commit. That happens to be taller and better looking than you. Well, gee, thanks. And it's funny. I was squarely friend zoned, and my joke with my therapist was, I was in the friend zone the whole weekend, except when it was time to pick up the checks. But this new background I got from my walk around New York City, I did enjoy the moments of friendship, and am sad that my attraction to the person kind of killed what could have been a fun friendship for the weekend a little bit. But I also wish the friend loosened up a bit, but that's a whole other thing. And I was going somewhere with this. I got my love for New York City is sort of back this weekend. It was just nice to walk around Central Park in Brooklyn in beautiful weather. What I love about bringing an outsider to New York City on a first date, or even friends coming in, if I run out of crap to talk about, I could just start pointing out buildings. Did you know the Brooklyn Bridge was built in 1883? By the way, I put a lot of energy into recording a fresh background for the YouTube people. Doesn't it look good? It's like live. It's like actually, it's not cycling every 3 seconds. If you notice when I do the World Trade Center, there's a ferry that goes past like every 2 seconds. There's not that many ferries on the East River. But that's a whole other thing, people. You don't need the behind the scenes stuff. But where was I going with it? But what I like about Pat and Steve, if that's really your name, what I liked about Pat and Steve was the joke of, we'll renew at 30 years. I like the idea of renewing after a weekend, and then you extend the contracts. That's what they do in TV. Like when you start on a TV show, they usually, like a network show, if you're working at like Conan O'Brien, or even when I worked at Rosie O'Donnell back in the day. ABC doesn't do this, I don't think, but they would give you 12-week contracts. And I guess that was also their way of, so they wouldn't have to deal with you're getting fired lawsuits. But if you were like really a desirable employee, which by the way, I never was, they would give you a 36-week contract or a year contract. I think when I was at Rosie, it was always, I was getting a letter every 12 weeks saying, hey, congratulations, we want you for another 12. Anyway, that's what I kind of like in a relationship. Because the nice thing about having somebody in a long distance relationship is just when you get sick of the person, you just have to gut it out for another day and get them on the plane. So my congratulations to Pat and Steve. I don't know if this is really the whole, there's so many things I wanted to talk about and I just did not quite get to. But you know what, man? Maybe I'll start doing more podcasts, but we'll figure it out. But right now, I am going to get into the car and rush to Long Island and hopefully catch my nephews. Guaranteed new podcasts every Monday and Wednesday. Special thank you to SalPinos of North Bellmore. We are catering our Thanksgiving dinner with food from SalPinos, and that one takes so much pressure off of my sister-in-law, who creates a beautiful home for the family. I actually should do a funny commercial about SalPinos. Do you mind if I pause, audience? Let me pause and just try to create something that could be broken into a TikTok. See, the punchline would be, she doesn't cook as good as my mother. There we go. Let's see. Can we do that quick? I gave my sister-in-law a SalPinos of North Bellmore gift card because she works so hard every holiday to create a beautiful home for my family, and because she doesn't cook as good as my mother. Yeah, there we go. That'll work. Actually, that won't work at all. And the good news is, this is the real test to flush out if my sister-in-law or anybody at the family dinner listens to the podcast. All right, guys, new shows every Monday and Wednesday, and whenever the hell I feel like it, and new content across the board on TikTok and Instagram as Tom Kelly Show. I know, guys, you have a lot of other options for your time, and I appreciate every minute you spend with me. It makes me feel connected. It keeps me motivated, and I am grateful, and I hope you're getting something out of this too. And if you get a chance, whenever I post local content, if you could share it on your own feeds, tag people more famous than I, who may be appropriate for it. I know the Long Island content people seem to be good for my Long Island content, and it does help. It really, you have been a part of my success this year. So please show love where love can be shown. And thank you, guys. Good night, New York.